Chapter 9, Energy Metabolism, Screencast 7. This screencast will be focusing on fasting and feasting, and it is important to realize that both of these dietary practices will impact metabolism. The form of each macronutrient and the rate at which it is used varies when calorie supplies are insufficient or exceed bodily needs. During initial fasting, the body will fuel itself with glycogen and fatty acid. If fast continues, fats will continue to be broken down and cannot be used to fuel the nervous system or red blood cells. Glycogen stores are depleted. Body tissue is broken down to make glucose from glucogenic amino acids. During prolonged fast, you start to deplete body protein. Fatty acids cannot be used for gluconeogenesis. We start to see depleted levels of sodium and potassium, which are also lost in urine with ketone bodies, and we now are starting to see an increase in levels of blood urea. Now, the body has adaptations to survive fasting. One of the things that will happen is a decrease in the metabolic rate. Overall, this reduces energy requirements, and it also slows down the breakdown of lean body tissue that's necessary for gluconeogenesis. Another adaptation is the nervous system is able to use more ketone bodies, but still, proteins are needed to make some glucose. After 50% of lean body mass is lost, death actually will occur. This diagram here basically talks about postprandial, short-term, and long-term fasting. Postprandial is considered 0 to 6 hours after eating. So basically, we have carbohydrate, glycogen from the liver, to glucose, meeting energy needs. Fat coming from adipose stores will be broken down into fatty acids and glycerol. Potentially, fatty acids will be broken down to ketone bodies, okay? And we will see fatty acids meet energy needs. Glycerol will be broken down to glucose. Protein, this is coming from muscle tissue, will be then broken into amino acids. They will be deaminated to form glucose and meet energy demands. Now, if we look at short-term fasting, now this is 3 to 5 days, we basically look at how we meet body needs. Notice carbohydrate and glycogen stores are exhausted, and there's limited capability for glucose to be produced from carbohydrate. Now, if we look at fat from the adipose stores, once again, we'll see it broken down to fatty acids and glycerol. Some glycerol will form glucose to meet energy needs. Fatty acids will be converted to ketone bodies, meeting energy needs. If we look at protein, once again, this is coming from muscle tissue, and the amino acids will be deaminated to make glucose. Here's that gluconeogenesis, and once again, glucose to meet energy needs of the body. Now, when we look at long-term fasting, so this is 5 to 7 days and beyond, once again, carbohydrate, glycogen stores are exhausted at this point, so no way of getting glucose from there. Fat will be once again broken down to fatty acids and glycerol to ketone bodies to meet the energy needs. If we look at protein, once again coming from muscle tissues, and amino acids will be used to make glucose for gluconeogenesis. But keep in mind, we are now going into lesser and lesser stores and a decreased capacity to make glucose overall. Now, feasting, the most obvious result is storage, and that will be as fat tissue. Feasting will also increase the production of insulin, the burning of glucose for energy as opposed to lipid at resting levels, the production of glycogen, and also the synthesis of protein and fat. Now, fat consumed in excess will be stored in adipose tissue. Little energy is required. High fat, high energy diets promote body fat production. Protein consumed in excess does not promote muscle development. Many amino acids will stay in pool or form fatty acids, or eventually will be excreted in urine. Carbohydrates that are consumed in excess, first they will go to maximize glycogen stores. Once glycogen stores have been completed, then we're going to see glucose basically converted into fat, and that will also result in a decrease in catabolism of fat. Anyone who consumes more calories from any of the energy-yielding nutrients than what the body can use will gain weight. This is a positive energy balance. Now, if we look at the role of liver, this is where lipogenesis takes place. What's going to happen here, basically, the steps link acetyl-CoA to form a 16-carbon fatty acid known as palmitic acid, and insulin actually increases the key enzyme that are necessary for this process to occur, which is fatty acid synthase. Now here we can see overall the impact of feasting. So when we look at carbohydrates, basically glucose into glycogen and fuel for muscles, brain, nervous system. If we look at fat, fat very much will be converted into triglycerides. Notice as will excess glucose. Glycerol can actually form glucose. Okay? If we look at protein, amino acids can be converted to fatty acids or enzymes, hormones for tissues, but eventually we see the storage form of triglycerides being the ultimate thing that happens when we are consuming in excess of energy yielding substances. Now here we're basically looking at things that yield ATP. So we're going to be looking at glucose, fatty acids, glycerol, amino acid, alcohol. We're going to be looking at whether or not they yield glucose. Do they yield amino acids for body proteins? Do they yield fat for adipose tissue stores? And what is the overall cost of conversion to adipose tissue stores? Glucose obviously will yield glucose. It will not yield amino acids for body proteins. It will result in fat when in excess, and the cost to convert glucose to lipid is relatively high. Fatty acids cannot be formed into glucose or amino acids. It will result in fat storage for adipose tissue, and since we are talking about fat, there's a minimal cost associated to convert adipose tissue stores into fat. If we look at glycerol, we can get some glucose, but it's not a major pathway. We will not get amino acids. It will yield fat for adipose tissue stores, but once again, the cost will be relatively high. If we look at amino acids, yes, we can get glucose, but it's not easy. Of course, we're getting amino acids since we are amino acids. It is not very efficient for fat adipose tissue storage, and the cost is high. If we look at alcohol, we do not get glucose or amino acids. We can get fat, but the cost of conversion of the adipose tissue to adipose tissue stores is relatively high.